The Chosin Few. The Chosin Few is a solitaire wargame by Victory Point Games. It represents an episode, a chapter in the Korean War, where you will take control of American forces that are defending against enemy units that are pouring from the north. And you will have several missions to accomplish, several tasks that you're trying to perform. The map is a point-to-point map, as you can see, with arrows that you can use to move and also that regulate enemy movement. You see these tokens here, they're called line of departure tokens. They're placed in different positions throughout the game, in different phases of the game, to indicate the points where enemy units will enter the board. So the entry points or enemy reinforcements will change throughout the game. The game is divided in 3 chapters. Each chapter has a specific order. You start with Almond's instructions that you're trying to complete. So you have an objective for this chapter, then you will move to chapter 2 and chapter 3, if you're lucky, if you get that far, because of course you may also lose the game earlier than that. You lose the game if you fail to complete the 3rd objective. See, I'm not showing it entirely, so you have a little bit of a suspense effect there. So you lose if you cannot complete the 3rd objective or if one of your units is completely destroyed. You only have 2 units in the game, a marine unit and an army unit. And here you see their strength. There are 2 tracks to keep track of the strength of the units. It may seem counterintuitive, but the higher the number that you see there, the worse things are for the units. And this is why if you go below 6, you lose the game. You lose the game also if you lose one of your 2 units. And the paradox of increasing numbers representing worsening conditions is explained by the fact that these numbers are not exactly strength points, they're target numbers. Early in the game, the Marines fighting hit an opponent when they roll 3 or more. When they take a wound, they can only hit on a 4 or more, 5 or more, only 6. And if they take a further hit, they lose. So 2 units only. There's an unusual way of keeping track of strength based on the target numbers. And as we said, only 2 units on the board. It's a fairly abstract, it's a fairly minimalistic design. Back to the orders. So the orders tell you the objective that they're trying to achieve. They tell you where you place the lines of departure tokens for the current phase, for the current chapter of the game. There are instructions before you begin. At the beginning, or before the beginning of the first chapter, you discard 10 cards from this deck of action cards. And also, you have failure. If you are not able to complete your objective by the end of the chapter, then you suffer the consequence, the consequence penalty. The chapter ends when this card is drawn. You shuffle this card together with the bottom 5 cards of the activity deck. You shuffle the other cards, possibly removing some, if such are the instructions that you have received. And then the way the game works is similar to many other solitaire games that you probably have played. Or in any sense, there's a familiar idea here. The first, you draw a card from the activity deck, and that tells you the enemy activities that you need to perform. Then you receive a number of action points that you use to perform actions with your own units. And you continue like this until either you lose the game during the present chapter or you find the end of order, you survive long enough to get the end of order. Then you check to see if you achieved the objective of the present order. You reposition the lines of departure, you reset the activity deck, and you're ready to start the next order with a different objective, and then the 3rd order. And again, if you complete the 3rd order, you win the game, which is really tough to do. This is a extremely tough game. Now, what do the activities do? First, you look at the top card, and the new activity maybe would have been more intuitive if it was called reinforcements. This new activity section tells you of the new enemy pieces that enter the board. Enemy groups are represented by wooden tokens, and you need to put them in a cup to randomize them. And these wooden tokens are drawn randomly. Here, this new activity section tells me that 3 new troops, 3 new units are entering the board, so I draw them randomly. I draw 3 of them, and I place them in the line of departure points indicated here. So 1, 3, and 6. 1, 3, and 6. Like that. Then, oh, look at that. I drew a black and 2 blue, and then the enemy units that will move this turn are blue and back. So first I move blue units and then black units. It may be that it's the same kind of unit that moves twice. It may be 2 different units moving. But the second thing that you do is to check for movement and perform movements of all units that apply. Now, units of the enemies usually move along white lines, so that would be the case, that would be the case, and this would be the case. Unless one of your pieces is on an area that has an edge of the color corresponding to an arrow that is going out of the area where the enemy is, which is a very convoluted way of explaining that if this is the situation, you're in an area that has a pink edge, and that is the case, the enemy piece does not go on the default white arrow, but moves through the pink arrow. This is the case, white. Another way of saying it is that they will go on white connections unless they see a chance of attacking you. When you resolve enemy movement, you also need to resolve combat if the enemy movement would put the enemy piece in the same location where you are. I said it would because in truth you don't really need to move the piece. You can think of units as attacking across the arrow because there are only 2 possible results. That the unit fails to hit you and then goes back there, or that the unit hits you, inflicts a damage, and then goes back there. So the unit doesn't move. The enemy unit doesn't really effectively move either way if they're attacking. To resolve an enemy attack, you look at your present target number, you roll a die, and that's it. Because if you roll higher than your target number, so you can think of that as a defense number now, if you roll equal to or higher, then you defend it, the enemy is still there, but is not attacking you anymore and doesn't give you any damage. If you roll lower than your target number, which is the defense number now, when you're defending, you lose a step, and so you move this marker here 1 space down that track, which again is bad because it raises your target number, which is both the defense number and the attack number. So place new activity on the board, move blocks belonging to the enemy, resolve possible combats in which you are the defender, then take actions, and you can take up to the number of actions indicated there. The actions that you have are movement. You can spend 2 action points to move across a connection. You can spend an action point to attack an enemy unit. You do not need to reach the to enter the same area as the opponent. You declare the attack, you roll a d6. If you roll equal to or higher than your present target number, which is now the attack number, you remove the enemy piece, otherwise nothing happens. And you can perform the same action multiple times in the same turn, and you can perform your actions in any order. Also, you can spend 3 actions to recover a single point of strength to move your marker 1 space up on that track. At the end of your turn, you can convert your unspent action points into air support. So in truth, it is like you can spend action points to buy support. The way it's phrased differently is simply because of timing, because you can only get air support at the end of the turn. That means you can only use it and place it, for example, for interdiction starting from the next turn. Air support markers can be used in several ways. They can be placed in an area as long as it doesn't have your own units in it. You don't want to bomb your own units, and then enemy units cannot move into or out of an area that has an interdiction marker. Also, they can be used to reroll combat results, and finally, air support can be used to buy die roll modifiers. You can spend an air support token to add 1 to a die that you roll, either in defense or attack. this is the game. Continue like this, move them, resolve their attacks against you, perform your actions, trying to complete the objectives, and see what happens. But I can tell you, most likely, you will lose the game because it's a really, really tough game to beat. Now, general assessment, conclusions, the Chosin Few. The Chosin Few is a game that I like up to a point. I think it has a couple of things that count against it and that detract from the potential. I think the game has a huge potential that is only partially expressed here. Maybe I should say the system has a huge potential. Then maybe will be better expressed in other games than this one. What am I trying to say is, let's start from the system. The system is very good. The Chosin Few system is excellent. I definitely like the simplicity and elegance that you have in the way that U units are brought to the fore, that U units move in different ways. So the ones that enter the board are not necessarily the same ones that will be then moved. The way that they move, following fairly logical connections. The AI, in other words, is excellent. And it's an AI that also is great because it can take into account different phases of action. I like how the game is divided in chapters with different objectives. And again, in a very simple way, the setup of each new order can take into account a lot of off-map action, the enemies that are attacking now from different directions. Early on, as you can see, they come from here. Later, if you make it to the third order, then you're trying to break through this area. You're trying to reach the bottom of the map, and now the lines of departure relocate to the side of the map, so they're trying to cut you off. You have a lot that can happen here. You have an AI that can abstract a lot of different actions in a very simple, intuitive way. I like that very much. I see a huge potential here for solitaire gaming. And I like the simplicity of the system. In a certain sense, of course, it's reminiscent of the State of Siege system, especially the combat system, where you're rolling against a target number in when you receive a number of actions that you can spend in any combination of ways. All of these things are good. Also, I like the fact that the game covers a topic that we do not see very often in wargaming, that is not all that easy to cover in wargaming, especially when a game tries to cover it at a strategic level, to cover it all. To cover sections of the game is probably a wiser choice, and here you do get a sense of the historical challenges. You do get a sense of the overwhelming odds that the army and the Marines were fighting against. You do get overwhelmed by waves of enemies that just would not stop coming, and you do have this sense of mounting dread as you see your capabilities worsening and you never have enough actions to do all that you want to do. It is a good solitaire system about an interesting topic, and I think it does well in giving you a general sense, a general flavor for the historical events. And again, I like that there is an overarching narrative that emerges from the fact that you're not always doing the same thing, you are doing different things. Huge potential here. Why I think that this game, however, hints at more that it achieves. Everything that happened in the game that I liked made me think of so many other ways in which the game could have been made deeper and even more satisfying. As is the game, as I said, it does a good job overall. It could have done a better one, and it feels a little unsatisfying for several reasons. The game really feels too thin to me. I'm all for simple games, for simplicity. And I'm all for elegant abstractions of complex historical events. But I think maybe this game went a little too far in the ways of abstracting, of removing, of taking details away. Only 2 pieces for you to control is really not much to do, doesn't leave you many options. Each hit is a steep, devastating reduction in your capabilities. It's not just that it makes the game hard, and I'm okay with hard games. It's just that it makes it a little too linear. Once you get here, then there isn't really much that you can do. Yes, you can spend actions to recover, but I think maybe the game would have been more interesting if we had had like a longer track and maybe with several spaces on the track still having the same target number. So you know you're getting close to the next step, so to speak, but you're not quite... you're not quite there yet. Having a track with other types of penalties, just a longer track. And again, it's not to make it easier, it's to preserve the suspense for longer so that they can take several hits and still not to be completely overwhelmed. Also, if you play State of Siege games, you have many ways in which you can spend actions, for example, to buy resources, to buy different things. Here you cannot do it. All you can buy, in a sense, is a resource. The only resource you can buy is recovery, which is super expensive. But there are other games where you can buy modifiers. Maybe you would have bought different types of things that would have facilitated combat in certain ways, in certain locations, against certain units. And that's another problem that I have. Which again falls on again the same line of the game being a little too straightforward, a little too minimalistic, a little too abstract. The problem here being that all enemy units fight in exactly the same way, no matter the situation, the conditions, the directions they're coming from, their formation, the weapons, the exact location where the fight happens. It's all based on you. No matter who attacks you, from where and in what circumstances, you always fight in the same way. I wish that since we have cubes that have different colors, they could have been coded in different ways with different units doing different things. This is something that actually came to mind as I was playing a completely different game 2 days ago, or a couple of days ago actually. And the game is Automobiles by AEG, where it's kind of like a variant on the deck building system, deck building engine, where you build a pool of wooden cubes that you put in your bag. But those cubes, also they are different colors, they mean different things in different games. So they're associated with cards, and maybe a blue cube in one game allows you to perform a certain effect, another cube allows you to perform another effect. I mean, this is why I see the potential here. We could have had different cubes representing different types of units, doing different things, maybe even the same cube representing different things in different chapters. I'm falling in love and seeing a lot of potential here with the idea of, instead of drawing cards to generate effect, to combine cubes and cards so that the same component can do different things in different phases, in different games, etc., etc. I think there's a great potential here that has not been explored. As a result, we have a game that does a good job of giving you a general flavor of the historical event, presents a very tough challenge, but it just feels a little too abstract, a little too thin, a little too linear. I would have liked more chrome, I would have liked more detail, I would have liked maybe more pieces I can control, maybe different effects that happen as I lose capability, units that behave in different ways for me to face different challenges, and different ways for me to build my capabilities, to strengthen myself, to face situations in different ways. I would have liked more game effects to give me more game variety. As is, the game is good, not bad, but it feels a little repetitive because they don't do much, the enemies don't do much, you don't get to do much. And that is a little bit the problem that I have with this game, what I think prevents this game from being much better than it could. But again, I really hope that the designer returns on the system and simply gives us something that has a little more meat to it, a little more depth. Maybe the idea was to introduce players to a new system, to road test the system. The system works. The system works. Be more ambitious, dear designer, because I think you are onto something really good here, and I think that, and I hope that the next games will put the system to work onto other interesting topics. This is an interesting topic, but simply with a little more of an ambitious approach, with more chrome flavor and game effects. Then I think that the system can really achieve great things.